In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to update data in SQL. So back to our invoices table, look at the first record here. The payment total for this record is 0, and obviously there is no payment date. Now let's imagine that there was a problem in the system that recorded this information. Let's say the client paid $10 for this invoice. So we should update this record in this table. That is very easy. Back to our query editor window, we use the update statement to update one or more records in a table. What table? In this case, invoices. Next, we add the set clause, and this is where we specify the new value for one or more columns. In this case, we want to update payment total. Let's set it to $10. We should also update payment date. So we use a comma to add more columns. We set this to a date value, let's say 2019, March 1st. And then we type out a condition. With this condition, we identified the record or the records that need to be updated. In this case, we want to update the invoice number 1. So back to our query, we type out invoice ID equal to 1. Let's execute this. Beautiful. Now back to our table. Let's refresh the data by clicking on this icon. All right, you can see payment total is updated to 10, and we also have a payment date. Beautiful. Now let's say we actually updated the wrong record. Maybe we should have updated invoice number 3. So we should update this table one more time and restore the original values in these columns. Back to our query, we can set the payment total to 0 and the payment date to null. So we can use the null keyword to insert the null value in a column that accepts null values. Now back to the navigator panel, let's open this table in the design mode. You can see that the payment total column has a default value of 0, and the payment date column has the default value of null. So back in our query, we can also set payment total to default, and MySQL will use the default value for this column, which is in this case 0. So let's execute this statement one more time. Beautiful. Now back to the table, let's refresh the data. So payment total is set to 0 and payment date is null. Beautiful. Now let's go ahead and update the third payment. Look at the invoice total. That is $147. For this example, let's imagine that the client made 50% of the total amount on the due date. So back to our query editor window, instead of using a literal value here like $70, we can write an expression. We want to calculate 50% of invoice total. So invoice total times 0.5. Now let me break this code into multiple lines so we can see clearly. Now we should set the payment date. As I told you, this client made the payment on the due date. So we can set this to due date. Whatever value we have in this column will be used to set the payment date. And obviously we need to update the invoice ID, number 3. Now back in the table, let's refresh the data. All right, look, payment total is updated and it's set to almost 50% of the invoice total. However, this number is truncated, so we don't have the digits after the decimal point. Don't worry about it for now. We'll come back to this when we talk about data types later in the course. Also, we can see that payment date is set to the same value we have in the due date column.